Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something vast, old and honestly a little strange. The entire story of the Titans. We probably won't survive this, not because it's dangerous, but because it's boring in exactly the right way. Like a lullaby made of stone tablets and family drama stretched across the stars. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm always curious where these myths are floating off to in the middle of the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start at the very beginning, or rather, before beginnings meant anything. Imagine floating in a space where nothing exists, not even the idea of nothing. This is chaos, but not the kind of chaos where your closet floor is buried in unmatched socks. No, this is primordial chaos, a yawning gap, a void without light, sound, or Starbucks. It's hard to picture, and maybe that's the point. You lean back in this cosmic blankness and feel how unnerving it is that even time hasn't shown up yet. You could sit here forever, but forever doesn't exist either. The Greeks used chaos as their catch-all explanation for what came before anything else, an empty canvas before the universe sneezed itself into being. And then, without fanfare, the void kind of coughs up the first actual things. Out of chaos drifts Gaia, the earth herself. She's not a person made of soil, she's the planet, the hills, the caves, the valleys, the squishy places where water will one day pool. She stretches out endlessly, warm and heavy and grounding, like that feeling when you lie flat on the floor after a long day. Right alongside her pops up Tartarus, which is basically the universe's basement. Tartarus is where things go when they're too heavy, too terrible, or too unwanted to hang out in the sunlight. It's not hell exactly, it's more like a cosmic storage closet for the broken furniture of existence. But that's not all. Out of chaos also comes Nyx, the personification of night. Think of her as a velvet shadow slipping over the edges of everything, mysterious and soft, but also slightly intimidating. With her comes Erebus, the darkness that fills in the gaps. Together they're the moody couple at the cosmic party, draping everything in gloom. The scholars debate how literal the Greeks were with all this. Were these beings meant as actual characters, or were they poetic stand-ins for natural forces? The line blurs, and maybe that's the point too. Myth doesn't explain the universe so much as it hands you dreamlike images to float on. Gaia, feeling a little lonely in her newly minted existence, brings forth Uranus, the sky. You can picture this as a dome of stars pressing down against her surface, or as her eternal partner. Their relationship is complicated. At first it seems sweet, the earth and the sky locked in a cosmic embrace, but Uranus quickly becomes the kind of overbearing spouse who doesn't leave any room for personal space. He spreads himself across Gaia constantly, never letting her children climb into the light. Yes, that's foreshadowing, and yes, it's going to get weird. One quirky little fact. Some versions of the myth say that Gaia actually produced Uranus all by herself. No partner needed. In other words, she just invented the sky because she thought it would be a nice accessory. Like, I'm feeling a little naked. Let's add some twinkling stars and a firm blue ceiling. It's a very DIY move, and if you've ever assembled IKEA furniture alone, you'll get the vibe. Now, here's the debate part. Scholars still argue about how old these myths are. Were they purely Greek inventions, or did they borrow heavily from older cultures like the Babylonians or the Hittites? Some think chaos resembles the Babylonian idea of a watery abyss, while Uranus and Gaia echo earlier Earth-sky couples from the Near East. But others insist the Greeks stitched their own patchwork quilt here, blending influences but making the story distinctly theirs. The funny thing is, we'll never really know. It's like asking who invented soup. It probably just happened, and everyone has a recipe. As you're imagining all this, you can feel how slow and heavy it is. A void. A planet emerging. A dome of sky pressing down. These aren't quick events, they're dreamlike stretches of nothing happening, until suddenly something does. It's the kind of cosmic pace that makes your eyelids feel heavier. You're watching the universe unroll like the world's slowest yoga mat. But don't drift off quite yet. Gaia and Uranus are just the start. Soon there will be a family tree so tangled, it makes your relatives' holiday arguments look like polite dinner chatter. Titans, monsters, gods, they're all waiting in the wings, restless to step into the story. For now, though, just float in the silence of chaos, with Earth stretching beneath you and the starry sky pressing close above. It's not much, but it's home, and every myth starts somewhere. The silence doesn't last. Gaia, ever the multitasker, keeps producing more life out of herself, like a magician pulling scarves from her sleeve. From her soil and stone she shapes mountains, rivers and valleys, each one humming faintly with the promise of what's to come. And from the warmth between her and Uranus, the first real family emerges, the Titans. But before they arrive, you pause with Gaia, who has this strange mixture of nurturing patience and low-key frustration. Imagine a mother who wants her children to thrive, but her partner insists on keeping them locked in the basement. That's the exact dynamic here, and it's not going to end well. You watch Uranus sprawl across the sky, glittering with stars, regal and distant. He's technically the father of everything about to unfold, but he doesn't win any awards for parenting. Instead of letting his children breathe and roam, he forces them back into Gaia's depths, hiding them away. For her, this isn't just annoying, it's suffocating. The weight of all those children stuffed inside her makes the earth groan and quake, and you can almost feel the tension under your own skin. Family drama on a cosmic scale. So, who are these first children? Well, the roster is big and complicated, but the first ones that matter are the 12 Titans. You'll meet each of them later, but for now it's like Gaia has opened the casting call for an epic movie, and the lineup is long. Hyperion, Themis, Oceanus, Rhea, Cronus, names that echo like thunder across ancient hills. Each one is more than just a character. They're archetypes. Fire, justice, memory, time. These Titans are the building blocks of reality itself. It's less like a family tree and more like a starter kit for a functioning cosmos, and it doesn't stop there. Alongside the Titans come other stranger children. The Cyclopes, one-eyed blacksmiths with a talent for forging divine weapons, and the Hecaton chairs, creatures with 50 heads and 100 hands each. Yeah, you heard that right. 100 hands. It's a detail so ridiculous that it feels like someone in ancient Greece was trying to spice up story time with their kids. And then, they had 100 hands. These beings are powerful, but Uranus, in all his insecurity, decides they're too weird and dangerous. So naturally, he shoves them back into Gaia's womb as well. Here's where the quirky fact sneaks in. Some versions of the myth say Uranus didn't just fear these children, he outright hated them. His logic? They were ugly. Imagine being judged by your dad not for your GPA or your messy room, but for being born with too many limbs. It's ancient cosmic body shaming at its finest. And that insecurity, that attempt to suppress what he finds threatening, is the seed of Uranus's downfall. But let's pause on Gaia. She's patient, yes, but she's also cunning. With her children trapped inside her, she starts to plot. She knows that if one of her offspring is brave enough to take a stand against Uranus, there might be hope for a new order. One by one, she approaches her children, whispering plans of rebellion, like an underground resistance leader recruiting allies. Most of them hesitate, because their dad is literally the sky, and picking a fight with the sky seems like a bad idea. But one child listens, one child nods, one child agrees. Cronus. And this is the moment where myth shifts gears from peaceful creation to family coup. Here's the scholarly debate that drifts in like a whisper. Why did the Greeks imagine their universe as born out of violence and betrayal? Many cultures picture creation as harmonious or divine, but Greek myth is dripping with dysfunction. Was it a reflection of how the Greeks viewed family life, politics, or even nature itself? Chaotic, unpredictable, hostile. Some historians argue it's a storytelling technique, a way to make cosmic events feel relatable. Others think it reveals something deeper about the Greek psyche. Maybe they just accepted that strife was the natural engine of life. Either way, the result is the same. Order always emerges out of conflict. Meanwhile, back in the story, Gaia prepares her tool for rebellion. She fashions a sickle out of adamant, sharper than any blade, glinting with cold purpose. You can almost hear it slice the air as she presents it to her children. But only Cronus has the nerve to reach out, fingers trembling as he accepts it. In that moment, he's already different from the rest. Ambitious, reckless, willing to gamble everything for a chance at power. You don't need to be told he's going to play a big role later. You just know. As you picture all this, the pace slows again. You see Gaia beneath you, immense and solid, and Uranus arching above like a jeweled ceiling. Between them hangs tension so heavy you could cut it with that very sickle. The children stir restlessly, trapped in the earth, while Cronus sharpens his courage in silence. It's the calm before the storm, the moment in a lullaby where the melody dips low, inviting you to drift just a little further towards sleep. But don't close your eyes yet, the sickle hasn't swung. That moment is coming, sharp and brutal, and it will change everything. For now, rest in the slow heartbeat of Gaia, the eternal mother plotting her first act of rebellion, and wait for Cronus to rise. The sickle waits in Cronus's hand, but before he swings it, the story pauses to widen the lens and let you meet the family he's part of, the original 12 Titans. They're less like siblings and more like puzzle pieces, each one carrying some fragment of the universe inside them. You can think of them as the beta version of the gods, a little raw, a little rough around the edges, but still powerful enough to shape reality. It's a cast list you'll want to remember, because they're going to keep reappearing in strange cameos as the story rolls forward. First, there's Oceanus, who feels more like a feature of the world than a person. He's the titan of the great encircling river believed to flow around the edges of the earth. Imagine the horizon, that endless blue where the sea meets the sky. The Greeks pictured it not as empty space, but as a literal river, looping back on itself, holding the world in its watery embrace. Oceanus is calm, steady, and a little aloof, more introvert than troublemaker. He'll avoid the worst of the family drama, which is rare in this crowd. Next to him is his partner, Tethys, the mother of rivers and streams. If Oceanus is the endless loop, Tethys is the branching network, sending veins of water across the land. Together, they're like the plumbing system of the cosmos, quietly necessary but rarely thanked. You could almost imagine them muttering in the background, "Fine, we'll just keep everything hydrated while you guys throw thunderbolts." Then there's Hyperion, who shines with a kind of radiant arrogance. He's tied to the sun, the dawn and the moon through his children, and you can sense he carries himself like he's the family's rock star. Standing beside him is Thea, his partner, who embodies sight and the shimmering brilliance of precious gems. They're that glamorous couple at the family reunion who look way too polished, and everyone secretly rolls their eyes at them. Chaos and Phoebe come next, the intellectuals. Chaos embodies questioning, inquiry, and intellect, while Phoebe is tied to prophecy and the oracle at Delphi. You picture them sitting a little apart from the rest, trading cryptic remarks no one else understands. They are not the loudest voices in the room, but their influence lingers long after. Mnemosyne is quieter, but she carries the power of memory itself. Without her, there's no story, no history, no song. Later she'll give birth to the Muses, those 9 divine sisters who basically inspire all human creativity. For now, she's like the family archivist, storing away every detail so that you, centuries later, can lie in bed and hear this story. Then comes Themis, who's all about order, balance, and cosmic law. Imagine her as the rulebook of the universe, but not in a harsh way, more like a bedtime routine that keeps things from falling apart. She represents a sense of justice that will later echo through Zeus's rule, though he'll bend those rules whenever it suits him. Cronus is here too, though honestly he's the awkward one. Nobody really remembers what he does. Later poets struggle to assign him a domain, and he fades into obscurity. He's that cousin who shows up at reunions, eats the potato salad, and never says much. But he's still a Titan, still part of the great lineup, even if his job description reads TBD. Finally, there's Rhea and Cronus, who deserve a little extra spotlight. Rhea, the earth goddess often linked with fertility and motherhood, will play a crucial role in saving her children from being devoured. And Cronus, you already know his name is going to echo. Ambitious, ruthless, a little paranoid. He's the youngest of the Titans, the one willing to act when the others hesitate. You can already feel his shadow stretching forward into the future, sharpening around that sickle. Here's your quirky fact for this round. Some ancient sources insisted there were more than 12 Titans, up to 24 in some lists. It's as if the Greeks couldn't decide how big the family reunion should be, so they kept adding extra cousins when needed. The official 12 are the ones that stick, but like any mythology, it's messy. And here's where scholars still argue. Were the Titans actually gods, in the sense we think of Olympians? Or were they something stranger, closer to elemental forces? Oceanus feels more like a river than a person, Mnemosyne more like a concept than a character. The debate continues because myth blurs the line. Maybe the Greeks themselves didn't care about categories. They just told stories, and the boundaries shifted like shadows on the wall. You settle into the rhythm of their names, each one heavy with meaning, like stepping stones across a dark river. The Titans aren't flashy yet. They're waiting, looming, the prototypes of a world that hasn't fully formed. But their presence is undeniable. You can feel them pressing at the edges of the story, ready to tip it into the next act. And at the centre of them all, Cronus sharpens the sickle and waits for his moment. You lean closer to Hyperion now, because if the Titans were a dinner party, he'd be the one who insists on sitting under the brightest lamp. His name means the one who goes above, and you can tell he likes the sound of it. Tall, glowing, radiating importance. Hyperion is the Titan most closely tied to light. Not just the vague glow of stars, but the daily procession of the sun, the silvery calm of the moon, and the blush of dawn itself. He and his partner Thea are the kind of couple who make everything look cinematic, as if they've walked straight out of a golden painting. Together they bring 3 children into the mythic world. First comes Helios, the sun god, who drives his blazing chariot across the sky each day. You can almost hear the creak of the wheels, the clatter of hooves striking sparks, as Helios hauls daylight like a stubborn delivery man. Then there's Selene, goddess of the moon, drifting softly across the night in her silver carriage, pulling dreams behind her like mist. Finally, Eos, the goddess of dawn, bursts forward with her rosy fingers, painting the horizon in pinks and oranges. If you've ever watched sunrise after pulling an all-nighter, you've met Eos in her subtle but dramatic entrance. Hyperion himself doesn't do much after his kids take the spotlight, but you can see his influence through them. He's like a producer who fades into the background once the movie's stars take over. Still, there's something regal about him, the way his eyes catch the shimmer of the cosmos, the way he insists on being remembered even if the poets eventually push him aside. In some stories he's called the Watchful One, which makes sense. Imagine a Titan just quietly observing everything from above, glowing faintly as if he knows how it all will end. Here's a fun little quirky detour. The Greeks didn't always agree on who ran the sun. Sometimes it's Helios, sometimes Apollo later steals the job, and in a few rare scraps of myth, Hyperion himself is credited as the original sun god. Imagine that family argument. Dad, it's literally my job to drive the chariot. Son, please, I invented the chariot. Ancient sources can't quite decide if Hyperion retires gracefully, or if later storytellers just ghosted him. Either way, his legacy shines on in the rhythm of day and night. But here's the debate part that keeps scholars busy. Were the Titans like Hyperion actually worshipped? Or were they more like narrative devices in a cosmic prequel? Archaeological evidence suggests the Olympians got temples, statues, festivals. The Titans not so much. It's possible they were mostly literary characters, invented to give Zeus and his siblings a dramatic backstory. Others argue there were scattered cults devoted to figures like Helios or Selene that hint at Titan worship, but the evidence is patchy. Maybe the Titans were too big, too vague, too concept-heavy to inspire local rituals. After all, it's hard to light incense for the entire sky dome. Still, you can feel how the myth insists on their importance. Hyperion's family of light reminds you that myths aren't just about gods throwing tantrums. They're about explaining why the sun rises, why the moon changes, why dawn creeps in on cue. To the Greeks, the children of Hyperion weren't just pretty metaphors. They were answers to the daily mysteries of existence. The world is brighter because Hyperion's line exists. Simple as that. As you picture Hyperion standing tall with his glowing family, you also notice the contrast with his siblings. Oceanus is watery and quiet. Mnemosyne is thoughtful and still. Cronus is practically invisible. But Hyperion is all shine and show. It's like the family gathering has that one cousin who always shows up in designer clothes and insists on telling everyone about their latest accomplishments. And honestly, you need that balance. A myth without a little drama would just be geology. Slow the pace now and imagine the sky unfurling into dawn. Eos stretches her arms. Helios yokes his fiery horses. Selene lingers at the horizon before slipping away. It's all choreographed, a cosmic dance that repeats endlessly long before humans put names to it. You watch it happen in slow motion, the light shifting, shadows stretching, colours bleeding across the edge of the earth. Hyperion may not be the star of later myths, but his family's glow still reaches you, still reminds you why the world never stays in darkness for long. The sickle is still waiting in Cronus's hand, but for a moment, let yourself sink into the cycle of sun, moon, and dawn. It's steady, reliable, hypnotic, the perfect rhythm to lull your thoughts softer. The drama will come soon enough. Now the glow of Hyperion fades behind you and you drift toward the deep, rolling sound of water. This is where Oceanus comes in, the titan who doesn't roar or blaze but hums like a river that never ends. Imagine standing at the shore of the world and looking out, not at endless space, but at a vast stream curving back on itself. That's Oceanus, the river that circles the earth, looping forever, carrying the whole world like a bracelet. He's not dramatic, not violent. If Hyperion is a show-off, Oceanus is the quiet sibling who minds his business and never gets grounded. Oceanus is married to Tethys, his sister of course, because Greek mythology rarely bothers with complicated dating pools. Together, they produce a staggering number of children, the Potamoi, who are the gods of rivers, and the Oceanids, the goddesses of springs, fountains, and streams. When I say a staggering number, I mean it. Ancient sources casually drop the number 3,000 for each category. That's right, 3,000 sons and 3,000 daughters, like a divine boarding school where every creek, puddle, and waterfall has its own demigod mascot. You picture it, rivers flowing with distinct personalities. The Nile, grand and proud, the Scamander near Troy, fiery and combative enough to nearly drown Achilles in battle. The little nameless brook behind your old house, shy and gurgling, probably represented by one of those Oceanid daughters. Suddenly the world feels alive with voices trickling and rushing, each current whispering its story as it slips toward the great encircling stream. But Oceanus himself, he's a pacifist. Unlike many of his Titan siblings, he never joins the rebellion against Uranus, and later he skips out on the Titanomachy, the war against the Olympians. He prefers to keep flowing unbothered, wrapping himself gently around the world. If there's a Titan you'd actually want as a neighbour, it's probably him. Steady, constant, not likely to throw mountains at your house. Here's the quirky tidbit that always makes me smile. The Greeks believed Oceanus's waters fed directly into the sky. That's right, rainfall wasn't just clouds and condensation, it was the great river looping upward, spilling from heaven, back onto Earth. Imagine the entire hydrological cycle powered not by physics, but by one eternal Titan politely recycling his water supply. In a way, he's the original eco-warrior, keeping everything in balance. But scholars squabble over this watery figure. Some argue Oceanus isn't even a true Titan at all, pointing out that he never seems to act like the rest of them. He doesn't rebel, doesn't fight, doesn't get punished. Was he just a leftover piece of pre-Greek cosmology, borrowed from older river deities in the Near East and stitched into the Titan family tree? Others suggest he's deliberately outside the chaos, a symbol of stability, reminding us that even in a myth stuffed with betrayals and battles, something steady keeps flowing. The debate leaves him half insider, half outsider, both Titan and not Titan, both character and landscape. And if you pause here, you can almost feel that steadiness. Oceanus isn't flashy, he doesn't demand attention, he's just there, surrounding everything, humming softly like background noise. If Hyperion's family is the fireworks, Oceanus is the white noise machine, soothing, repetitive, endless, is the kind of mythic presence that could lull you to sleep if you let it. Waves folding into one another, with no beginning and no end. Picture yourself standing at the edge of his current, the water stretching wider than your eyes can measure. The river loops back on itself so perfectly that you can't tell which way it flows. Maybe both, maybe neither, maybe it doesn't need direction at all. You dip your hand in and the water feels cool, eternal, as if it's been there long before you and will remain long after. In the background of the story, Cronus is still sharpening his blade. Gaia is still groaning under Uranus's weight. But Oceanus, he just keeps flowing, carrying the world in his arms, unaffected by the storms brewing elsewhere. In the middle of cosmic tension, he's the calm heartbeat, the river that says, things change, but I don't. And if your eyelids feel heavy now, it's because you've been listening to that river too long. Oceanus has that effect. Let it wash over you, steady and cool, before the sickle falls and the myth gets messy again. You drift now from the steady hum of Oceanus into something more delicate. Tethys, his partner, whose name doesn't get sung nearly as loudly but whose influence runs everywhere. If Oceanus is the endless river wrapping around the world, Tethys is the branching system of streams, rivulets and springs that seep into every crack of the earth. She's the goddess of nurturing waters, the mother who makes sure every valley gets a drink. Every hillside hums with trickling veins of life. Where Oceanus is vast and grand, Tethys is intimate, local, familiar. She's the gentle gurgle of a brook outside your window at night. Her children fill the earth with variety. The 3,000 Potamoi, her sons, are river gods, each one embodying a specific flow of water. Some are mighty, some modest, but all have their own moods. The Scamander, for example, becomes famous in the Trojan War, so furious with Achilles that he nearly drowns him in his currents. The Nile is another, massive, sacred and steady, feeding Egypt for millennia. And then there are thousands more, nameless but still vital, every rivulet and creek with its own divine guardian. Then come her daughters, the Oceanids, who are even more numerous. They are spirits of springs, fountains, lakes and seas, often invoked as nurturing companions to more famous gods. Some become minor household names, Metis, who represents wisdom, or Doris, linked to the sea nymphs called the Nereids. But most of the Oceanids are like soft background characters, present, sustaining, but not demanding attention. You can imagine them darting like fireflies across the earth, each one anchoring a source of water, each one making sure that life doesn't dry up. Here's the quirky little fact about Tethys. Unlike most of her siblings, she completely sips the big family drama. She doesn't fight Uranus, doesn't rebel with Cronus, and later she avoids the Titanomachy against Zeus. Some ancient poets even hint that she sides with the Olympians when the fighting begins, quietly supporting the new order. In other words, she's Switzerland, the neutral party pouring tea while the rest of the family flips tables. Maybe that's why she fades into the background of myth. Peaceful characters rarely hog the spotlight. But here's where scholars raise their eyebrows. Some think Tethys was originally a major goddess in her own right, not just a Titan wife. In the earliest layers of myth, she might have been associated with the sea itself before Poseidon rose to dominance. Over time, her role shrank, her power diluted into her thousands of children, until she became more a name in a genealogy chart than a central figure. Was she replaced by male gods as the Greeks restructured their pantheon? Or did storytellers simply find the Olympians flashier? The debate lingers, like ripples spreading on a still pond. You pause to feel the rhythm of her waters. Unlike Oceanus's thunderous current, Tethys is soft, whispering, almost maternal. You can imagine the earth as one enormous sponge, and Tethys as the one who squeezes water through its cracks, keeping everything alive. She doesn't need the spotlight because her influence is everywhere. Every time you sip from a stream, every time you hear rain patter against your roof, you're brushing against her presence. Picture yourself lying beside one of her springs. The air is cool, the water steady, and the grass leans lazily toward the sound. You trail your hand through the flow and realize this is just one of thousands of places where Tethys hums softly in the background. No grand speeches, no thunderbolts, just water, steady and patient, carrying life forward without fuss. Meanwhile, in the bigger story, tension still builds. Uranus keeps pressing down on Gaia, the children remain trapped, and Cronus's grip on the sickle tightens. But Tethys, she's not rushing, she's flowing as she always has, steady and unbothered. While the rest of her family schemes and rebels, she reminds you that not everything in myth has to be sharp and violent. Some parts are gentle, essential, quietly sustaining, and as you let her waters surround you, it's easy to sink into their rhythm. The trickle becomes a lullaby, the endless branching streams weaving through the earth, and your thoughts alike. Maybe this is why the Greeks gave her thousands of children, because her influence is so vast and subtle, it can't be pinned to one face or one story. It's everywhere, always flowing, always humming. Let yourself drift with her rivers now, following their bends and turns, knowing that every one of them eventually loops back to Oceanus. The family drama can wait a moment longer. Tethys has you resting in the sound of water, and it's almost enough to pull you under. From the gentle murmur of Tethys's waters, you drift into a quieter corner of the Titan family, one where the mood shifts from flowing streams to sharp intellect. Here stand Chaos and Phoebe, two figures who don't glow like Hyperion or thunder like Oceanus, but who carry something subtler, the mind. If the Titans were a toolbox, Chaos would be the question mark carved into the handle, while Phoebe would be the shimmering hint of prophecy etched on the blade. They aren't about brute force, they're about thought, reflection, and glimpses of the future. Chaos is sometimes called the Titan of the axis of heaven, the pivot around which the stars turn. Imagine him as the still point in the sky, the invisible hinge that makes the constellations wheel overhead, but he's also linked to questioning, intelligence, and deep inquiry. You get the sense that if the family were debating whether to overthrow Uranus, Chaos would be the one stroking his chin asking, "Yes, but what happens after?" He's not the loudest voice, but his questions hang in the air, unsettling in their weight. Phoebe, his partner, has her own quiet glow. She's tied to prophecy, clarity, and the power of foresight. Later traditions give her control of the oracle at Delphi, the most sacred place of divine insight in the Greek world. Imagine her as the grandmother of oracles, whispering threads of truth into the smoke long before Apollo takes the shrine for himself. Her very name means bright or radiant, but not in the flashy way of Hyperion. Hers is the silver glow of the mind lit with understanding. Together, they have 2 daughters who leave a big mark on myth: Themis, goddess of divine order, and Leto, who will later give birth to Apollo and Artemis. You can see how this family tree bends toward wisdom and foresight, shaping the Olympians before they even arrive. Chaos and Phoebe don't throw mountains in battle, but their lineage ensures that prophecy and clarity will thread through Greek myth forever. Here's the quirky little fact. Some sources claim that Phoebe gave her grandson Apollo the Oracle of Delphi as a birthday gift. Imagine that. Most kids get a toy or a slice of cake, but Apollo receives the most famous prophetic shrine in history, neatly wrapped and handed down the family line. It's the kind of mythical inheritance that makes modern wills look painfully boring. But scholars debate how much of this is retroactive storytelling. Was Phoebe always connected to Delphi, or did later poets assign her that role to explain Apollo's takeover? Some argue that she was originally just a vague, bright titaness, without a clear job description, and only later did mythographers stitch her into the prophetic tradition. Others insist she was always part of the oracular lineage, a reminder that prophecy didn't belong to Olympians alone. It's one of those academic arguments that spirals in circles, much like the stars spinning around Chaos's cosmic axis. As you sit with them, you realize Chaos and Phoebe are less about action and more about atmosphere. They bring stillness, the hush before a revelation, the pause before someone blurts out the truth. Imagine lying on your back under the night sky, watching the constellations shift slowly, and feeling the weight of questions you can't answer. That's Chaos. Imagine hearing a soft voice in your ear, telling you what tomorrow will bring, but in riddles you'll only understand too late. That's Phoebe. They don't demand center stage, but they shape the story from the shadows. Without their lineage, Apollo wouldn't have his oracle, Artemis wouldn't stand as divine huntress, and the Olympians would lack one of their most powerful connections to fate. It's subtle, but powerful, the kind of influence you don't notice until you realize the entire story has been leaning in their direction all along. And as you picture them, Chaos tilting the heavens, Phoebe glowing with quiet foresight, you feel the myth slow again. Their presence isn't fiery or loud, it's thoughtful, steady, like the kind of late-night conversation that wanders through questions without needing answers. Perfect for letting your mind soften, drifting from the busy details of the day into something slower, quieter, almost prophetic in its calm. From the silver glow of Phoebe's foresight, you stumble into the corner of the Titan family tree that feels almost forgotten. Here stands Cronus, the Titan no one seems to know what to do with. If this were a family reunion, Cronus would be the guy sitting quietly by the punch bowl, nodding politely when spoken to, but otherwise fading into the wallpaper. His name means ram, which sounds promising. Rams are strong, stubborn, head-butting creatures, but strangely myth gives him no heroic headbutts, no wild adventures. He's more like an unfinished sketch than a fully painted figure. Some storytellers try to assign him a role. They suggest he's linked to the constellations, the heavenly axis, or perhaps to the measure of time. Others connect him with Aries, the ram in the zodiac, as though his whole identity is just being a celestial mascot. And then there are those who admit, we don't really know. Cronus exists, he's listed among the 12 Titans, but beyond that? Silence. For a culture so eager to pile drama onto every god, it's almost suspicious how little we hear about him. What we do know is that Cronus marries Eurybia, a sea goddess with a hard heart and a knack for mastering the power of the waves. She's fierce, almost metallic in her energy, and together they have children who are far more memorable than their father. Astraeus, their son, is linked with dusk and the stars, while Pallas becomes associated with warcraft, and Perseus takes on the role of destruction. They are like the sparks of intensity that flare from Cronus' otherwise dim presence. Maybe that's his role after all, to be the quiet backdrop against which his children shine brighter. Here's the quirky fact that makes Cronus oddly lovable. In some interpretations, he represents the southern corner of the sky. That's right, he's not a dramatic god of thunder or prophecy, he's basically the compass point south. Imagine being immortalized in myth as the cosmic equivalent of a street sign. His siblings get domains like memory, justice, or the encircling ocean, and Cronus gets a direction. It's both hilarious and a little tragic. Scholars, unsurprisingly, debate whether Cronus even had a role in early myth. Was he just invented to round the Titans up to a nice even 12 because humans love tidy numbers? Or did he once carry a forgotten significance, some story or ritual that got lost as Olympian worship took over? Some argue he's a leftover scrap of astronomical lore, a placeholder for early stargazers mapping the night sky. Others think he's proof that even the Greeks sometimes shrugged and said, just put another Titan in there. But even forgotten figures have their charm. Picture Cronus in the Titan lineup standing awkwardly between his flashier siblings, mumbling his introduction. "Hi, I'm Cronus. I point south." He may not have the thunder of Oceanus or the radiance of Hyperion, but he's part of the scaffolding that holds the myth together. Sometimes stories need the quiet ones, the fillers, the names that keep the family tree branching. Without them, the drama feels too curated, too neat. With them, the myth feels more real, messy, inconsistent, human. And if you let your thoughts settle, there's something soothing about his vagueness. Cronus doesn't demand you picture fiery chariots or endless rivers. He just stands still, blank, almost like a star you can't quite identify in the night sky. That quiet anonymity has its own calming rhythm. You don't need to know every detail, don't need every figure to shout their purpose. Some can just exist, like background constellations humming softly above. Meanwhile, Cronus is still waiting with the sickle. Tension still coils beneath Gaia, and Uranus still presses down. But for a moment, you're standing beside Cronus, the forgotten Titan, and feeling the strange peace of being overlooked. Not every god needs a headline. Some simply glow faintly in the dark, pointing you south, and that's enough. From the hazy outline of Cronus, you wander into something sturdier, warmer, and surprisingly comforting. Mnemosyne, the Titaness of memory. Her very name hums with recognition, a soft echo of things you've forgotten, but can still feel brushing at the edges of your mind. Where Cronus is vague, Mnemosyne is solid. She's the keeper of remembrance, the reason stories like this survive long enough to lull you to sleep thousands of years later. Without her, the Titans would dissolve into silence. With her, they linger, names carved into the folds of memory. Mnemosyne isn't flashy, but her role is profound. She embodies not just personal recollection, but the entire human ability to store and pass along knowledge. Imagine a world without memory. No history, no myths, no names to whisper in the dark. The Greeks pictured Mnemosyne as the fountainhead of all culture, the reason you could even sing, recite, or dream. She was worshipped in certain places, often alongside her daughters, the Muses, who gave inspiration to poets, musicians, and artists. In a way, she is the spine of myth itself, the one who keeps the stories alive while the other Titans fade into shadows. Her most famous role comes later, when she lies with Zeus for 9 nights in a row. Yes, 9 nights, because apparently one wasn't enough, and conceives the 9 Muses. Each muse governs a different art. Epic poetry, music, dance, astronomy, even history itself. There are the sparks that ignite creativity, the reason humans sing and paint and write. Without Mnemosyne, there's no call to the muses, no poems, no lullabies. Even this bedtime story owes her a debt. Here's the quirky little fact. The Greeks also believed in 2 rivers of forgetfulness and remembrance tied to her. In the underworld, souls could drink from Lethe, the river of forgetting, or from Mnemosyne's spring, which preserved memory of past lives. Some mystery cults even promised that if you drank from her waters after death, you could escape the cycle of rebirth by remembering who you truly were. It's a heady mix of philosophy and poetry. Imagine lining up after death, choosing between forgetting everything or holding on to it all forever. A pretty big decision for a ghost with limited time. And here's the scholarly debate. Was Mnemosyne always this cosmic figure of memory? Or did she start as a more mundane goddess, maybe tied to rivers or local cults, before evolving into the titaness of remembrance? Some argue she was more of an allegorical invention, a concept turned into a deity so poets could explain where their words came from. Others point to inscriptions and rituals that hint she was genuinely worshipped, not just imagined. As with many titans, the truth lies somewhere between, part myth, part metaphor, part forgotten rite. As you sit with Mnemosyne, you can almost feel her presence in your own drifting thoughts. Every detail of this story, every titan's name sticks because she exists. Memory itself becomes a character, and that's strangely comforting. She doesn't swing sickles, doesn't throw mountains, doesn't rage against Uranus. She simply keeps the record, ensuring that all of it, chaos, betrayal, glory, won't vanish into the void. Picture her now as a tall figure with a calm face, her hands cupped like a bowl of water. Within that water, shimmering, are all the names and images of the cosmos. You lean closer and see reflections. Hyperion's glow, Oceanus's endless river, Tethys's trickling springs, Phoebe's silver light. All of it is stored within her, rippling softly, waiting to be recalled. She doesn't speak, but the silence itself feels heavy, weighted with stories stretching both backward and forward. And as the pace slows, you realize she's here even in your own memory. Her domain doesn't stop at myth. She's why you remember lullabies from childhood, the smell of your grandmother's kitchen, the sound of your first favourite song. The Greeks gave her a name, but she's also the quiet hum that makes humans human. Meanwhile, the myth continues to simmer. Cronus sharpens his sickle. Uranus still looms overhead. Gaia still groans under the weight of her trapped children. But Mnemosyne sits patiently at the edge, holding the memory of it all, ensuring that even when the cosmos changes hands, none of it will be lost. From the still waters of memory, you step into a space that feels like a courtroom before dawn. Quiet, orderly, but heavy with expectation. This is the realm of Themis, the titaness of divine law, balance, and justice. If Mnemosyne keeps the stories, Themis writes the rules. She doesn't swing weapons or demand temples full of gold. Instead, she embodies the natural rhythms that hold the cosmos together. Day follows night, seasons shift, rivers flow toward the sea. All of this, in Greek imagination, hums under her watch. Themis' very name means that which is put in place, a kind of cosmic order that isn't about punishment but about alignment. She represents the laws that exist whether you notice them or not, the soft underlying structure of reality. When humans later built their own laws, their own courts and systems of justice, they imagined Themis as the divine original, the one who set the example. You can almost picture her standing beside Zeus in later myths, quietly advising him on how to rule, like the universe's most patient life coach. Themis also has children, and they embody her role perfectly. From her come the Horae, the goddesses of the seasons, who keep time flowing smoothly across the year. They bring spring, summer, autumn, and winter in their endless cycle, keeping nature's clock ticking. She's also said to have given birth to the Moirai, the Fates, those three severe sisters who spin, measure, and cut the thread of every human life. Themis herself may not grab the spotlight, but through her children, she makes sure that every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Here's a quirky little fact. In Greek art, Themis is often shown holding a pair of scales, much like modern depictions of Lady Justice, except she's not blindfolded. Themis doesn't need to cover her eyes. She sees perfectly well, and her justice isn't about impartial blindness but about cosmic balance. If something tips too far one way, she quietly adjusts it, ensuring harmony. You can almost imagine her walking through the chaos of the Titan family, setting chairs straight at the dinner table while everyone else yells. But scholars still debate her role. Was Themis originally a primordial goddess, older than the Titans themselves, folded into their story later? Some evidence suggests she predates even Gaia and Uranus in cult worship, tied to oracles and early rituals. Others argue she was always a Titan, one of Gaia's brood, and simply rose to greater prominence when the Olympians needed a figure of wisdom and order at Zeus's side. Either way, she represents one of those fascinating mythic crossovers, both a Titan of the old order and a trusted ally of the new gods. As you picture her, There's a steadiness to the image. Themis isn't dramatic, she doesn't argue or rebel, she doesn't rage against Uranus or plot against Cronus, she simply is, order embodied. Her presence is like the quiet tick of a clock on your wall or the rhythm of your own breathing. You forget it's there, but it keeps everything moving. Slow the pace for a moment and imagine standing in her hall. The air smells faintly of parchment and rain. Scales gleam on the table, perfectly balanced. A faint wind moves through the room, whispering of seasons to come, reminding you that even chaos follows patterns. You don't need to think about it, you just need to feel the steady rhythm, the law beneath the noise. Meanwhile, in the mythic background, Gaia still groans, Uranus still looms, and Cronus sharpens his blade. But Themis stands unmoved, ensuring that no matter who rules, Titan or Olympian, the seasons will still turn, rivers will still flow, and human lives will still unfold thread by thread. It's a quiet power, but sometimes the quiet ones are the most essential. You leave the cool steadiness of Themis's hall and wander into the part of the Titan family tree that's pure chaos disguised as genealogy. This is where Iapetus shows up, the Titan of mortality, craftsmanship, or sometimes just plain suffering, depending on which poet you ask. He isn't the flashiest of the Titans, but his children are some of the most memorable troublemakers in all of Greek mythology. In fact, his family is basically the soap opera spin-off of the Titan line, dramatic, rebellious, tragic, and a little bit brilliant. Iapetus himself marries an Oceanid, either Clymene or Asia, depending on who you ask, and together they have 4 sons, Atlas, Prometheus, Epimetheus, and Menœtius. If those names ring a bell, it is because every one of them is tangled in some major myth. Atlas ends up with the literal weight of the heavens on his shoulders. Prometheus becomes the trickster who steals fire for humans. Epimetheus, bless him, is the lovable idiot who accepts Pandora and her infamous jar. And Menœtius? He's the hot-headed one who charges into battle and gets obliterated by Zeus's thunderbolt. 4 sons, 4 cautionary tales, each embodying a different aspect of what it means to be human, or to fail at being divine. Atlas is probably the most famous, doomed to stand at the edge of the world holding up the sky. Some versions say he tried to lead the Titans in battle, and this was his punishment. An eternity of sore shoulders. Picture him hunched but unbroken, the constellation slowly wheeling above his head. It's exhausting just imagining it, but strangely peaceful too. A punishment that doubles as a living pillar holding up the universe. Prometheus, on the other hand, is cunning, clever, and endlessly sympathetic. He sides with Zeus against the Titans, but later turns around and defies Zeus by giving fire to humanity. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was knowledge, power, survival. Prometheus's act is both heroic and reckless, and his punishment is brutal, chained to a rock while an eagle eats his liver every day. Yet somehow he's remembered as a champion of humanity, a trickster with a soft spot for mortals. Without him, humans stay cold and clueless. With him, they get both progress and punishment. Then comes Epimetheus, Prometheus's less sharp brother. His name literally means afterthought, which tells you everything you need to know. While Prometheus thinks ahead, Epimetheus bumbles through life making rash decisions. He's the one who accepts Pandora as a gift from the gods, unleashing her jar of sorrows into the world. It's hard to be mad at him, though. He's the mythic equivalent of that friend who constantly loses their keys and you just sigh because, good, of course they did. And finally, Menœtius, the one nobody remembers because his story ends fast. He's described as doomed, ruined, violent. When the Titanomachy erupts, he charges recklessly into battle, and Zeus zaps him into Tartarus with a lightning bolt. End of story. He's a warning, a mythic post-it note that says, don't confuse rage for bravery. Here's a quirky fact. The 4 brothers are often read as representing aspects of human nature. Atlas is endurance, Prometheus is foresight, Epimetheus is hindsight, and Menœtius is destructive anger. Together, they are basically a psychological profile tucked into a myth, proof the Greeks were sneaking philosophy into their bedtime stories. But scholars debate Iapetus himself. Was he really important, or just a placeholder to justify these famous sons? Some argue he's another filler titan, like Creus added to pad the roster, while his children carry the real weight of myth. Others insist he symbolises mortality, the sharp reminder that humans are fragile, and his sons dramatise the different ways we wrestle with that fragility. His family might be messy, but maybe that's the point. Mortality itself is messy. As you rest with this family of 4, you can feel the shift in tone. These aren't just cosmic archetypes anymore. They're characters who live, fail, and suffer in ways that feel eerily human. You can almost see Atlas sweating under his burden, Prometheus smirking with stolen fire, Epimetheus blinking in confusion, Menoetius charging toward doom. They're flawed, imperfect, and strangely relatable. Meanwhile, Cronus still sharpens his sickle, Gaia still strains under her children, and Uranus still presses down. But with Iapetus's brood, you glimpse something new, the way myths begin to reflect not just the cosmos, but the stubborn, brilliant, mistake-prone creatures who will one day listen to these stories in the dark. From the noisy sprawl of Iapetus's family, the story tilts back to Cronus, the titan who's been lurking with the sickle in hand, waiting for his big entrance. He's the youngest of Gaia and Uranus's 12 children, which means he's got that younger sibling energy, restless, ambitious, and maybe a little reckless. While his older brothers and sisters hesitate at the thought of rising against their father, Cronus sharpens his courage and says yes to Gaia's plan, and with that nod, he steps into the role of ringleader, the one who dares to rewrite the cosmic order. Gaia, fed up with Uranus pressing down on her and stuffing their children back inside her womb, forges the sickle out of adamant, a mythical metal harder than steel. It gleams cold and sharp, humming with potential rebellion. She hands it to Cronus, and you can almost see the weight of it settle into his palm, not just the weight of the blade, but of destiny. His siblings watch, wide-eyed, torn between admiration and fear, because to rebel against Uranus is to rebel against the sky itself. Cronus doesn't hesitate. One night, when Uranus comes to lie across Gaia again, Cronus ambushes him. He leaps up, sickle flashing, and in one swift motion he castrates his father. It's shocking, brutal, and undeniably effective. Uranus reels back, wounded and humiliated, and the sky loosens its suffocating grip on Gaia. The children trapped inside her finally breathe free air. For the first time, the world feels open, expansive, no longer pressed flat by Uranus's weight. The blood from Uranus's wound falls onto the earth, and from it, new beings spring into existence. The Furies, avengers of blood crimes, the giants, towering warriors who will one day challenge the gods, and the Meliae, nymphs of the ash tree. And from the severed pieces thrown into the sea, foam rises, and out of that foam Aphrodite will eventually be born. Yes, the goddess of love and beauty comes from this gruesome act. It's one of those mythic ironies. Violence begets desire, brutality begets beauty. Here's the quirky fact. In some versions of the myth, Cronus doesn't act alone. The other titans hold Uranus down while Cronus wields the sickle. It makes the whole scene feel less like a solo act of rebellion and more like a group project where one sibling does the dirty work while everyone else stands by awkwardly. It's oddly relatable if you've ever been the one stuck doing the hardest part of a school project. But scholars still debate what this moment really means. Is Uranus's castration a mythic metaphor for the separation of sky and earth, a necessary step to create space for life to flourish? Or is it simply a tale of generational conflict, the eternal cycle of children overthrowing their parents? Some argue it reflects agricultural symbolism, the sickle representing harvest, the cutting away of old growth to make way for the new. Others see it as a darker psychological truth. Creativity and progress often require violence, rebellion, and loss. For Cronus, though, it means power. With Uranus gone, he steps up as ruler of the cosmos, crownless but commanding, a sickle in one hand and ambition in the other. He frees his siblings, takes Rhea as his partner, and ushers in what will be called the Golden Age. But the shadow of his act lingers because Uranus, bleeding and broken, curses him. He warns that Cronus too will be overthrown by his own children, just as he overthrew his father. It's a curse that will gnaw at Cronus's mind, driving every choice he makes from this point onward. You pause here and picture the scene. The night sky glitters, distant and cold, while Cronus stands triumphant, his sickle dripping with the weight of what he's done. Gaia breathes freely at last, the earth no longer smothered. The other titans stir, stepping out into the world for the first time, their eyes wide with possibility. And overhead, Uranus withdraws, his power broken, his presence forever changed. It's the first great rupture of the mythic cosmos, and its echo will ripple forward into every story that follows. Meanwhile, you feel the pace slow again. The sickle rests, The night grows still and the air hangs heavy with both freedom and foreboding. The new age has begun, but the curse already coils in the shadows, whispering of what's to come. The silence after Uranus's fall doesn't last long. The wound of the sky is still fresh, dripping possibility into the earth below, and every drop reshapes the cosmos. It's the kind of moment where you realise myths don't waste anything, not even spilled blood. Out of Uranus's severed flesh and the foam of the sea, new beings rise, strange and powerful like sprouts from broken soil. Violence in this mythic world is always fertile. First come the Erinyes, the Furies, born from the blood that soaked into Gaia. They are terrifying figures, winged women with snakes for hair, dripping venom, and carrying whips. Their job is to hunt down those who commit blood crimes, especially children who kill their parents. You can almost hear them hissing in the shadows, waiting for the next betrayal, the next wound in the family tree. It's fitting, really, that they were born at the moment a son rose against his father. The myth itself calls its own witness. Then come the Gigantes, the giants, also sprung from the blood. They are not polite, lumbering storybook giants. They are fierce warriors, covered in dragon scales, often armed with spears tipped in volcanic stone. They'll have their day much later, when they storm Olympus in the Gigantomachy, but for now they wait in the wings, sharpening their weapons, itching for battle. The Meliai appear next, ash tree nymphs. They are gentler than furies or giants, but no less significant. The Greeks believed humans of the Bronze Age were born from ash trees, so these nymphs represent both nurture and danger, the wood that makes both spears and cradles. Their presence is a reminder that nature itself is a child of violence, capable of soothing or destroying depending on how it's shaped. And then there's the sea, foaming white where Uranus's severed parts sank. From that froth, after a long swell and stir, rises Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. She steps out of the water at Cyprus, radiant, luminous, entirely out of place in the middle of all the gore. Imagine the sheer tonal whiplash. One moment, castration and curses. The next, the birth of the goddess who inspires every blush, every poem, every stolen kiss. The Greeks were saying something here, that beauty and desire are tangled up with violence, inseparable from the chaos that birthed them. Here's the quirky fact. There were actually competing myths about Aphrodite's birth. Some said she was the daughter of Zeus and Dione, a much tamer origin. But the foam from Uranus version stuck, probably because it's just so wild and unforgettable. It also gave her the epithet Aphrogenes, foam-born, which sounds elegant until you remember what that foam actually was. Ancient mythologists apparently loved the contrast between divine elegance and, well, severed sky parts. Scholars still wrestle with what all this means. Was Aphrodite's strange origin a leftover from older fertility cults in the Near East, repurposed by the Greeks to explain their goddess of love? Or is it a deliberate metaphor, that love itself is born from strife, that beauty grows out of bloodshed? Some argue the story reflects the Greek obsession with opposites, Eros and Thanatos, love and death, forever bound together. Others think it was just the poets leaning into shock value, because who forgets a goddess born from sea foam and violence? Meanwhile, Uranus himself doesn't vanish completely. Though he retreats to the heavens, wounded and dethroned, his curse lingers. He warns that Cronus will one day suffer the same fate, that his children will overthrow him just as he overthrew his father. It's a chilling prophecy, and you can see it sink into Cronus's mind like a splinter. From this point onward, every choice Cronus makes is shaped by that fear, that gnawing reminder that the sickle cuts both ways. Pause here and picture it. The earth still glistening with drops of divine blood, rivers running red with new life, strange beings stirring in the shadows. The sky hangs higher, no longer pressing against Gaia, and the air feels lighter, freer, though not exactly peaceful. Cronus stands tall in the centre of it all, the sickle heavy in his hand, triumphant but uneasy. He's won, but the curse has already begun to bloom in his heart. And as you linger on this scene, the pace slows. The chaos of battle has passed, replaced by a strange stillness, the kind that follows a storm when the air still smells of rain and ozone. It's not the end, it's the uneasy beginning of a new order. Cronus rules now, but the seeds of his downfall are already in the soil. The air after Uranus's fall is strangely clear. With the sky finally lifted away from the earth, life stretches and grows in ways it never could before. Cronus, the youngest Titan now turned ruler, steps into his reign, and the world shifts into what the Greeks later called the Golden Age. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? An age of shimmering perfection, when everything just worked. Humans lived without toil, without hunger, without fear. No one needed alarm clocks, tax collectors, or even cell service because, well, there weren't any humans yet. When they did appear, they wandered the earth like carefree children, safe and comfortable, basking in Cronus's calm rule. In this golden age, the earth herself provided for everyone without effort. Trees dropped fruit freely, rivers ran clear and sweet, fields bloomed without needing to be ploughed. Even the animals were tame, more like companions than prey. It was a time of abundance, no trade, no farming, no weapons. Imagine a world where your only task for the day is to nap in the sun and nibble on figs while the grass hums around you. That's the vibe of Cronus's reign. But here's the twist. The Greeks didn't always see this as utopia. Some poets describe the Golden Age as too easy, too passive, a time where people never grew, never struggled, never learned. In later myths, humanity's progress comes only after suffering, after Prometheus steals fire, after Pandora's jar unleashes toil and death. So while the Golden Age sounds blissful, it's also a kind of soft prison, a dream where nothing ever changes. Eternal summer, yes, but also eternal sameness. Cronus himself seems pleased enough. He rules with Rhea at his side, steady and calm, not yet consumed by paranoia. For a while, it feels like maybe the curse Uranus spat at him won't come true after all. Maybe Cronus will be the first god to break the cycle. The world hums, humans wander peacefully, and the Titans lounge in their newly won freedom. It's quiet, idyllic, the lull in a story that you almost want to believe could last forever. Here's your quirky little fact. The Romans loved this Golden Age myth so much they turned Cronus, whom they called Saturn, into a symbol of bounty and agriculture. Every December they celebrated Saturnalia, a festival of feasting, gift-giving and role reversal where slaves dined like masters. Later, fragments of this festival would slip into Christmas traditions, evergreens, merriment, even the timing of the season. So next time you open a holiday present, you're echoing the old Golden Age of Cronus, whether you realise it or not. But here's where scholars argue. Was the Golden Age meant to be a real before time, or was it always a nostalgic metaphor, an imagined past when things were better? Some say it reflects memories of simpler pre-agricultural societies when survival was easier in lush climates. Others argue it's purely literary, a way for poets like Hesiod to contrast the easy past with the troubled present. Either way, it shows how deeply humans long for a world where effort and pain don't exist, even if such a world might be boring in the end. As you let the image of the Golden Age sink in, you can almost feel the warmth of endless sunlight on your face. There's no struggle, no conflict, just the slow rhythm of life flowing easily forward. You hear rivers murmur, leaves rustle, distant laughter drifting over hills. It's hypnotic, like slipping into a dream where nothing is urgent and everything tastes sweet. For a bedtime story, it's the perfect lull, soft, glowing, weightless. But under that glow, shadows are gathering. Cronus can't quite forget his father's curse. At first, it's just a whisper in the back of his mind, a reminder that one day his children will rise against him. He shrugs it off, but soon it starts to gnaw at him, chewing holes in his peace. Even in the Golden Age, anxiety creeps in, a reminder that no rain lasts forever. The air may be calm, but you know it won't stay that way. So rest in this moment while you can. Enjoy the honey-sweet abundance, the weightless days, the effortless nights. Because soon Cronus will hear the first cries of his newborn children, and the Golden Age will begin to crack. The Golden Age drifts on like a lazy afternoon, but peace rarely survives in Greek myth. Cronus, though triumphant, can't escape the echo of Uranus's curse. The thought gnaws at him, that one day his own children will overthrow him just as he overthrew his father. You can almost see him pacing, the sickle tucked away, muttering to himself. Every time Rhea swells with another pregnancy, Cronus doesn't feel joy. He feels dread. And that dread curdles into something monstrous. When their first child is born, a daughter named Hestia, Cronus doesn't hesitate. He scoops up the infant, opens his mouth, and swallows her whole. It sounds absurd, almost cartoonish, until you imagine it. A god devouring his newborn, not out of hunger, but out of fear. Hestia slips into his stomach, alive but trapped, swallowed into darkness. and when Demeter, Hera, Hades and Poseidon follow, each child meets the same fate. Cronus gulps them down like bitter pills one by one, determined to cheat his curse. Rhea, understandably, is horrified. She pleads with him to stop, but Cronus just shakes his head, convinced this is the only way to keep his throne. Imagine her grief, each labour ending not with a lullaby but with the sound of swallowing. Her children aren't dead, not exactly. They're entombed inside their father, still growing, still waiting, like seeds pressed into the belly of the earth. When her 6th child is due, Rhea refuses to play along. She seeks out Gaia and Uranus, yes, the same parents who started this cycle of betrayal, and begs for advice. They tell her to hide the baby, and so she sneaks off to Crete, where she gives birth in secret. The child is Zeus, small and squalling, but destined to upend everything. She tucks him away in a cave on Mount Dicte, hidden from Cronus's gaze. To muffle his cries, she enlists the Curetes, armoured dancers who clash their shields and stomp loudly, drowning out the sound of the infant's wails. Imagine the cave glowing with firelight, warriors stomping in rhythm, a lullaby of clashing metal to keep a god hidden. But what about Cronus? He still expects his 6th child, and Rhea needs a trick. So she swaddles a stone in baby clothes and hands it to him. Without looking too closely, paranoia makes him careless. Cronus swallows it whole. And in that moment, you almost laugh at the absurdity. The king of the cosmos, reduced to eating rocks in his fear of prophecy. The stone sits heavy in his gut, and Zeus remains free, quietly growing stronger in the shadows. Here's a quirky little aside. The stone Rhea gave Cronus, called the Omphalos, later became a sacred relic at Delphi. The Greeks claimed it was the very rock Cronus had swallowed, set up as a reminder of both the trick and the survival of Zeus. Pilgrims came to touch it, a tangible piece of myth nestled into ritual. Imagine travelling miles just to pat a sacred baby rock, a story solidified into stone. And here's where scholars debate. Was the swallowing of children meant as literal myth, or was it a metaphor for time itself? Cronus, after all, is tied to the word chronos, meaning time. Some argue he represents time devouring everything it creates. Children swallowed like days into nights, whole generations consumed. Others point out that the two figures, Cronus and Kronos, were originally separate but later blurred. Still, the metaphor lingers. Nothing escapes time, not even gods. The image of Cronus swallowing his children is one of those moments in myth that sticks like a splinter. It's grotesque, but also oddly profound. You can almost feel the tension. Children trapped in darkness, waiting. Rhea scheming in secret, Zeus hidden in a cave. It's a lull before the storm, a pause before rebellion, a reminder that even in the Golden Age, fear and betrayal carve deep cracks. Slow down and linger in that cave for a moment. The air is cool, the stone walls damp, the distant clang of shields muffled into rhythm. Zeus sleeps, tiny fists curled, unaware of the role he'll play. Above, Cronus sits heavy on his throne, smug and bloated, mistaking paranoia for safety. The balance is fragile and you can feel it trembling. The Golden Age is about to fracture, and a new storm is forming. The cave in Crete grows darker as Zeus sleeps and grows, hidden away from his father's paranoid hunger. Outside, the world rolls on under Cronus's uneasy reign, but cracks begin to widen. The other Titans notice the unease in the air, as if Cronus's gulping paranoia has unsettled the balance Gaia worked so hard to restore. And soon enough, whispers begin to stir. A rebellion is coming, and it will make Cronus's sickle strike against Uranus look like a practice round. This is the Titanomachy, the 10-year war that will tear the heavens and the earth in half. It begins quietly. Zeus, now grown strong in secret, learns the truth about his siblings swallowed alive. He can't let them stay trapped forever, so he turns to Metis, one of the clever Oceanid daughters, for help. Metis brews a potion, bitter and sharp, and Zeus slips it to Cronus. The old Titan gulps it down, smug as always, but his stomach soon churns and writhes. One by one, his children come spilling back out. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, shaken but alive, finally free. Imagine the relief, the rush of siblings long trapped in darkness now standing together in the light. With Zeus at their side, they become the Olympians, a new force determined to topple Cronus and claim the cosmos. But Cronus isn't giving up quietly. He rallies the Titans who remain loyal. Oceanus bows out, too peaceful, but the rest brace for battle. On one side stand Cronus and his Titan allies, vast and ancient. On the other, Zeus and his freed siblings, young, fiery, eager to prove themselves. The stage is set for a war that will last 10 years, a cosmic stalemate where mountains become weapons and the air is torn apart by thunder. Picture it. The ground shakes as the Titans hurl massive boulders, entire hillsides ripped up and thrown like pebbles. The Olympians answer with lightning, thunder, and fire, each clash echoing across the universe. Rivers boil, forests crack, stars seem to tremble. It isn't a quick fight, it's the kind of grinding war that wears down both sides, year after year, until even gods begin to feel exhaustion. Here's a quirky little aside. Some versions of the myth say the Titanomachy wasn't fought just with fists and fire, but with sound. The 100-handers, when they join, are described as hurling not only rocks but a deafening roar that shakes the cosmos. Imagine the battlefield not just as chaos you can see, but as noise so overwhelming it rattles your bones. It's almost like the first cosmic heavy metal concert, with thunder for drums and boulders smashing for bass. But here's where scholars debate. Was the Titanomachy always part of the Greek story, or was it shaped later to give Zeus and the Olympians a heroic origin? Some argue it mirrors older myths from the Near East, like the Babylonian tale of Marduk battling Tiamat. Others think the Greeks invented it to explain why their gods looked younger and fresher than the primordial Titans. Either way, the war isn't just about violence, it's about generational change, the eternal story of the new replacing the old. As the years drag on, it seems neither side can gain the upper hand. Cronus and his Titans fight with raw strength, ancient and immense. But Zeus wields cunning and new energy. The earth groans under their battles, seas rise and crash, skies split with fire. You can almost feel the weariness of a decade-long struggle. Both sides refusing to yield, both sides convinced they're destined to rule. And yet, through the dust and fire, Zeus begins to see that brute strength won't be enough. He needs allies, something to tip the balance. He begins to think of the creatures Uranus once feared so much, the 100-handers and Cyclopes, locked away in Tartarus, forgotten in the darkness. If they could be freed, the war might finally turn. But that decision, that release, is still just beyond the horizon. For now, the Titanomachy rages endlessly, a war that feels both monumental and strangely repetitive, like waves smashing against cliffs year after year. Pause here and imagine the noise fading to a distant hum, the flashes of light dimming, the grounds shaking, settling into a rhythm. 10 years of war is too much for anyone to hold in detail. It becomes a blur, a long tension, a battle so vast it feels like background noise. And that's where you rest, not in the chaos of a single strike, but in the endless rhythm of battle itself. Thunder rolls, mountains fall, the world groans, and still, neither side wins. A lullaby of violence stretched so far it almost becomes calm. The war has dragged on so long it feels like the natural state of the universe. Lightning flashing, boulders flying, mountains cracking open like eggs. Yet through the haze of battle, one image rises clearer than the rest, Zeus and Cronus, father and son, facing each other across the chaos. On one side, the king of the Titans, ancient, broad-shouldered, the sickle no longer in his hand, but the memory of it still sharp in his glare. On the other side, the youngest god, lightning in his fists, eyes blazing with the reckless certainty of someone who hasn't yet learned what failure feels like. Their battles aren't just physical, they're ideological too. The old order clinging to power, the new order insisting on change. Cronus throws mountains, Zeus answers with storms. Cronus rallies titans like Creus and Iapetus, while Zeus calls on his freed siblings, Hades wielding the shadows of the underworld, Poseidon shaking the seas, Hera and Demeter pushing back with divine force. The clash is apocalyptic, the kind of fight you don't just watch, you feel it in your bones. The Titans fight with brute force, drawing on their sheer size and age, while the Olympians bring speed, strategy, and cunning. Imagine Cronus hurling a jagged peak, his rage shaking the ground, only for Zeus to split it mid-air with a bolt of lightning, the shards raining down in a firestorm. You can almost smell the ozone, the acrid sting of scorched stone, the air vibrating with the thunder of clashing wills. But the battle isn't evenly matched. The Titans are immense, but they lack invention. Their attacks are blunt, repetitive, predictable. The Olympians adapt quickly, shifting their strategies, flanking and dodging with an energy their older relatives can't quite match. It's like watching a heavyweight fighter tire out while a younger, faster opponent keeps darting in with sharp jabs. Still, neither side gains a decisive victory, and the war stretches on in a weary stalemate. Here's your quirky little aside. The Greeks sometimes said that during the Titanomachy, mortals hadn't yet been created, or if they had, they hid in terror, convinced the world was ending. Some later poets joke that the war's echoes were still heard in volcanic eruptions and thunderstorms centuries later. Every rumble of the earth or flash of lightning was, in their imagination, an echo of that old cosmic feud. Imagine every thunderstorm as Zeus practicing his battle stance, even after he'd won. And here's where the scholarly debate stirs. Did the Greeks imagine this war as happening in real time, or was it always outside of time, a mythic event that explained why the Olympians ruled without needing a fixed chronology? Some argue the Titanomachy is a symbolic story of progress, an allegory of the new generation rising against the old. Others insist it was a way to give Zeus legitimacy, a cosmic justification for why he deserved the throne. Either way, the story isn't just about throwing rocks and thunderbolts, it's about the inevitability of change. As you let the images swirl, you can feel the tension between Cronus and Zeus sharpening. Cronus, older, slower, yet fueled by desperation, refuses to yield. Zeus, young and brilliant, but still untested, pushes harder, lightning blazing brighter. It's the archetypal struggle of father versus son, the eternal cycle repeating itself. Uranus fell to Cronus's sickle. Will Cronus fall to Zeus's storm? But the war isn't over yet. For all their power, the Olympians can't quite topple the Titans. The battlefield trembles, the sky rips open, the seas boil, but the balance holds. 10 years of destruction, 10 years of stalemate. The world groans under the weight of it, as if the cosmos itself is tired of watching. Pause here and let the noise fade in him. Mind. Picture Zeus standing on a ridge, lightning still sizzling in his hands, while Cronus glares from across the valley, his chest heaving, his face grim. Between them lies a scarred battlefield, mountains split, rivers boiling, trees burned to ash. It's devastation, but also the hush before the tide turns. Because the Olympians can't win this war alone, they'll need allies from the depths, the forgotten ones buried in Tartarus. For now, the war hums like background thunder, steady, endless, almost soothing in its repetition. The battle doesn't need to end tonight. It can wait, stretching on in the slow rhythm of storms and stone until the next act begins. The war grinds on, neither side gaining ground, until Zeus finally realizes he needs something more than thunderbolts and stubbornness. Somewhere deep in Tartarus, the 100-handers and the Cyclopes are still chained, buried away by Uranus because he thought them too monstrous to walk in daylight. These beings, forgotten, immense, terrifying, become Zeus's secret weapon. And so in a move that changes everything, he descends into the abyss to set them free. Picture Tartarus, a pit so deep you could drop an anvil for 9 days before it hit the bottom. It's less a prison and more a cosmic oubliette, a place for whatever the gods didn't want to deal with. There, crouched in the shadows, are the 100-handers, the Hecaton chairs, Briareus, Cottus and Gyges, each with 50 heads and 100 hands. They're grotesque, enormous, but also strangely loyal. Alongside them lie the Cyclopes, massive one-eyed smiths with arms like tree trunks, their chains clinking faintly in the gloom. Zeus approaches, lightning illuminating the pit, and offers them freedom in exchange for their strength. The Cyclopes, grateful, give him gifts in return: thunder, lightning, and the crackling bolt that becomes his signature weapon. For Poseidon, they forge a trident so sharp it splits the seas, and for Hades, a helmet of invisibility, so dark it erases him from sight. These tools aren't just weapons, they're symbols of new power crafted in the belly of chaos itself. The 100-handers rise too, shaking off their chains, their 100 fists clenching as they prepare to hurl mountains. Imagine their roar echoing up from Tartarus, shaking the battlefield above before they even arrive. When they finally join the Olympians, the balance shifts instantly. With 100 hands apiece, they grab whole ridges and fling them across the sky, pelting the Titans in a storm of stone. Cronus' side, once steady, falters under this avalanche of sheer absurd force. Here's a quirky little aside. Some poets describe the 100-handers as so strong that when they fought, the earth itself quaked violently, causing what humans later felt as earthquakes. Every tremor under your feet in this view was just one of these guys stretching his arms after a century of sitting in Tartarus. It's the kind of explanation that makes sense if you're lying awake at night and need a myth to settle the unknown rattling of the ground. But scholars argue whether these allies were always part of the story. Did Hesiod invent their dramatic rescue to explain why Zeus won so decisively? Or were they ancient figures borrowed from even older myths? Some think the Cyclopes were originally just blacksmith gods tied to volcanoes, and later folded into the Titanomachy. Others think the 100-handers were pure invention, being so bizarre they could only exist in myth. Whatever their origin, they became the ultimate tipping point. With their help, the Olympians launch a final furious assault. Zeus hurls bolts so bright they blind, Poseidon smashes the seas into walls of water, Hades disappears and reappears, striking from the shadows. The 100-handers rain mountains down, their arms moving faster than the eye can follow. The Titans, massive but slow, stagger under the assault. Cronus roars and fights back, but even he can't hold against such a storm. The battlefield becomes unbearable. Fire and water clashing, stone raining, sky splitting. It's so loud, so violent, that it circles back around to quiet in your imagination, the way a constant roar eventually becomes white noise. You almost stop hearing the thunder and crashing rocks, it just becomes the background hum of change. And when the dust finally settles, the Titans are broken. Cronus and his allies lie defeated, battered, chained. The Olympians, bloodied but triumphant, stand tall, their new reign secured. The war is over, and the age of the Titans ends in rubble and shadow. Pause here for a moment. Imagine the 100-handers, sitting at the edge of the battlefield, still breathing heavily, their 100 fists slowly unclenching. Imagine the Cyclopes hammering sparks into the sky, their gifts glowing in the hands of gods. It's messy, it's terrifying, but it's also decisive. The turning point where myth itself shifts direction. And in the lull after the storm, you can almost hear it. Silence, thick and heavy, settling over the world. The Titans have fallen. The Olympians now rise. The battlefield still smoulders, mountains cracked open like shattered bowls. Rivers rerouted by falling boulders, the air heavy with smoke. The Olympians stand victorious, but victory in myth is never clean. Cronus and his allies are dragged down into Tartarus, their vast forms shackled in the pit they once ignored, and the 100-handers are stationed as their guards. It's fitting, the creatures Uranus once feared most now keep watch over the Titans who dare to rule, but not everyone is bound in chains. Some of the defeated find different fates, and among them is Atlas, Cronus' son, whose punishment is one of the strangest and most enduring images in Greek mythology. Atlas didn't hide behind Cronus, he fought. Some stories say he led the Titan army, charging into battle with a strength even the 100-handers admired. Others say he fought so ferociously that Zeus singled him out, not just for punishment but for a task that would last forever. Instead of being hurled into Tartarus, Atlas is condemned to hold up the heavens. Not the earth, that's a later mix-up, but the sky itself. Picture him at the edge of the world, knees bent, back straining, arms raised, pressing against the dome of the heavens to keep it from crashing down. It's an image both terrible and calm. His punishment is endless labour, but it's also strangely still. While other Titans writhe in chains, Atlas stands frozen in eternal effort, a pillar of flesh and muscle, the weight of the universe pressing into his shoulders. You can almost hear the stars groaning above him, shifting as he adjusts his stance. It's exhausting, yes, but also meditative. One position, one task, forever. Here's the quirky fact. Later, Greeks and Romans confused Atlas's punishment with holding up the entire earth, not just the sky. That's why you still see statues and globes today with Atlas bent under the weight of the world. But in the original myth, it's only the heavens, not the planet. Still, the mix-up stuck, and now he's the unlucky mascot for every high school geography classroom. Scholars debate what Atlas's punishment really meant. Was he an old star god forced back into his celestial role after rebelling? Was his burden a way to explain the mountains of northwest Africa, where the Greeks placed him, his body imagined as a towering ridge holding up the horizon? Or is he simply a symbol of rebellion crushed by responsibility? A reminder that ambition leads to endless strain? Each interpretation adds a different texture to his suffering. You pause and picture him more clearly, muscles trembling, sweat pooling at his feet, eyes locked upward at a sky that never lightens. The stars drift and turn, constellations sliding past his brow, and still he doesn't move. Sometimes travellers in myth come to him, Heracles, Perseus, and trick or plead for his help, but when they leave, Atlas always returns to his post, pressing the sky upward again, as if nothing had changed. Compared to the chaos of battle, Atlas's punishment is oddly soothing. It's static, repetitive, so an eternal posture. You can almost feel your own shoulders ache in sympathy, and yet there's something calming about the idea of a single task done forever, without choice or distraction. No decision-making, no shifting fate, just weight and stillness. Meanwhile, the Olympians spread out, claiming their thrones, their domains, their new order. Zeus takes the sky, Poseidon the sea, Hades the underworld. The world begins to shape itself into something recognizable, something closer to the Greece that will one day tell these stories. But Atlas stays at the edge, unmoving, a reminder of the war that was and the price of resistance. Let the image linger a moment. A lone figure beneath the stars, hunched, steady, caught between suffering and serenity. The sky presses down, but he never buckles. The cosmos spins overhead, but he never glances away. Atlas is both prisoner and pillar, punishment and necessity, and in the strange rhythm of his burden you feel the story slow again, heavy but calm, like resting under a weighted blanket that stretches across the stars. From the stillness of Atlas's shoulders, the story drifts toward firelight, not the soft glow of Hyperion's sun, but a stolen flame flickering in the hands of mortals. This is the work of Prometheus, Atlas's brother, who survives the Titanomachy not as a prisoner, but as a trickster on the sidelines. Where Atlas shoulders the sky in silence, Prometheus busies himself with schemes, cleverness, and an oddly persistent fondness for humans, the fragile creatures who barely deserve his attention but somehow win his loyalty. Prometheus's name means forethought, and he earns it. He sides with Zeus during the war, perhaps because he can see which way the winds of fate are blowing. But once the Olympians win, Prometheus starts looking around at humanity, shivering in the cold, stumbling in darkness, and decides they deserve more than scraps. Zeus, newly crowned king of the cosmos, doesn't think so. He keeps fire for the gods alone, hoarded on Olympus like a private luxury. To Zeus, humans are playthings at best, tools at worst. Why arm them with something as powerful as flame? Prometheus ignores him. In one of myth's most famous acts of rebellion, he sneaks onto Olympus, steals a glowing ember, some say from the hearth of Hestia herself, and smuggles it down to earth hidden in a fennel stalk. The first spark flares in human hands, and suddenly the world changes. Fire brings warmth against the cold, light against the dark, and the ability to cook, forge, and build. It is civilization in a single gift, slipped into the hands of mortals because one titan decided they deserved a fighting chance. Here's the quirky detail. Fennel stalks were actually used in ancient Greece to carry embers. The hollow stems could hold a coal for hours without snuffing it out, making them the perfect ancient fireproof container. So when Prometheus hides fire in fennel, it's not random, it's practical, the kind of trick only a clever titan would know, but Zeus isn't laughing. When he discovers the theft, his fury is immediate. Fire to him is more than warmth, it's power, technology, the spark of independence. By handing it to humans, Prometheus has armed them against the gods themselves. To punish him, Zeus has Prometheus chained to a lonely rock in the Caucasus Mountains. There, each day, an eagle swoops down to tear out his liver, and each night, the liver grows back, ready to be eaten again. The punishment is endless, cruel, and strangely poetic, because the liver, to the Greeks, was thought to be the seat of emotion and vitality. Prometheus isn't just losing an organ, he's having his spirit gnawed away daily. Scholars debate what Prometheus really represents. Some see him as a culture hero, a symbol of human progress, the titan who dared to defy the gods so we could rise from caves into civilization. Others interpret him as a warning, a figure who shows that cleverness without caution leads to suffering. Was he a champion of mankind or a reckless thief who brought more curses than blessings? The myths never quite agree, which is why he feels so human, complicated, contradictory, impossible to pin down. Meanwhile, humanity thrives with its stolen fire, even as Prometheus suffers. You can picture early mortals huddled around their first campfires, shadows dancing on cave walls, sparks flying into the night. They cook food, ward off beasts, and tell stories, perhaps even the very myth of Prometheus himself. The Titan chained in agony above them becomes the reason they have warmth, the reason they can sit together and whisper in the dark. His suffering is their survival. Slow the pace now. Imagine the mountain wind howling around Prometheus, the clink of his chains, the beat of massive wings as the eagle descends. The cycle repeats endlessly, talons, tearing, pain, silence, healing, dawn. Yet through it all, Prometheus doesn't regret his gift. He endures, stubborn as stone, because fire flickers below in human hands. His defiance burns as steadily as the flame he stole. It's a heavy image, but also strangely comforting. Sacrifice and progress twine together here, reminding you that every warmth carries a cost, every spark a shadow, and as Prometheus stares out across the horizon, liver aching, you can almost feel his sly smile. The gods can punish him, but they can't take the fire back. The fire glows in mortal hands, warming their nights, but Zeus isn't finished being furious. If Prometheus's theft gave humanity too much power, Zeus would balance the scales with a gift of his own, a gift that was really more of a trap. He calls upon Hephaestus, the divine smith, and orders him to sculpt a figure out of clay. Slowly, carefully, the shape takes form. A woman, flawless, beautiful, her skin smooth as polished stone. The gods gather around, each bestowing something upon her: charm, curiosity, beauty, grace. They name her Pandora, which means all gifted, though the gifts are double-edged. When she is complete, Zeus presents Pandora not as a blessing, but as a punishment. She carries with her a jar, later mistranslated into a box, sealed tight but humming with mystery. Inside it, unknown to her, are all the evils that will plague humanity. Sickness, toil, envy, despair. Zeus knows curiosity will do the rest. It's one of those divine traps where the bait is irresistible and the consequence inevitable. Pandora descends to earth and meets Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. Despite his siblings' warnings never to accept gifts from Zeus, Epimetheus sees her beauty and charm and can't resist. He welcomes her, delighted, ignoring the shadow in Prometheus's earlier advice. Pandora lives among mortals, her jar always close at hand, until one day curiosity gets the better of her. She lifts the lid, just a crack, and the world changes forever. Evils burst out like smoke swirling into the air. Pain, hunger, sickness, jealousy, greed, all the invisible weights of human life spill across the earth, staining what had been a golden existence. Imagine the first cough, the first quarrel, the first ache in the bones of a mortal who had never known pain. The world shifts instantly from dreamlike ease to something heavier, harsher, filled with struggle. But here's the strange part. Not everything escapes. At the bottom of the jar remains one final thing: Elpis, often translated as hope. Pandora slams the lid shut before it can fly away, and so hope stays inside, a faint light trapped amid darkness. Scholars can't agree whether this was a mercy or another cruel twist. Does hope remain in the jar to comfort humanity, or is it withheld, tantalizingly close but always out of reach? Even in ancient times, poets argued about whether hope was a blessing or a torment. Here's the quirky detail. The whole Pandora's box phrase is actually a mistranslation. The original Greek word was pithos, a large clay jar used for storage. It wasn't until the 16th century, when a scholar rendered the word as box, that the image shifted, and that mistake stuck so firmly that today everyone pictures a dainty little box, instead of a bulky, heavy jar. Myth often survives not through precision, but through the accidents of translation. Pandora herself has been read in 1,000 ways. Was she a punishment for humanity, the first femme fatale whose beauty masked disaster? Or was she simply curiosity personified, reminding humans that knowledge always comes with cost? Some scholars think she reflects old cultural anxieties about women's roles in Greek society. Others argue she's a more universal metaphor for human curiosity itself. What's clear is that she changes the tone of myth forever. After Pandora, life for mortals is no longer effortless. Struggle and suffering become the default, hope the rare counterbalance. You pause with the image of Pandora closing the jar, her hands trembling, her eyes wide as she realizes what she's done. Around her, mortals cry out, coughing, groaning, fighting, their perfect world shattered. And yet in her jar something faint still glows, humming softly. Hope doesn't leave, doesn't vanish. It lingers, quiet and ambiguous. The one mystery even Zeus can't fully control. Slow the pace now and imagine that jar in the corner of a dim room. Most of its contents are gone, scattered into the world, but one small pulse of light remains, flickering faintly. It's not enough to erase pain, but it's enough to remind mortals to keep moving forward. That faint light, that stubborn hum, that's why the story doesn't end in despair. It's what makes Pandora's tale both a tragedy and a lullaby. Harsh but strangely soothing, like a reminder that even in darkness, something small waits at the bottom of the jar. The jar is closed, hope trapped inside, and humanity stumbles into its new reality, aching, coughing, quarrelling, but still moving forward. Prometheus, however, isn't spared. His punishment continues on the lonely cliffside, the eagle tearing at his liver every day, and down below, his brother Epimetheus sits among mortals, scratching his head, realizing he might have made the single worst decision in myth, accepting Pandora without thinking twice. His very name, after all, means afterthought. He doesn't plan, doesn't foresee, doesn't question. He acts first and regrets later, a walking embodiment of hindsight. Epimetheus is a tragic kind of comic relief. He isn't malicious, he just doesn't think things through. He's the guy who presses agree on terms and conditions without reading, who opens sketchy emails, who buys the extended warranty for a toaster. When Pandora arrives, dazzling and delightful, he doesn't consider the possibility that Zeus might be pulling strings. He embraces her, and in doing so embraces the unravelling of the Golden Age. The two of them, Pandora and Epimetheus, become a strange pair, half love story, half cautionary tale. Some versions of the myth imagine them raising children together, their lives marked by the hardships Pandora unleashed. They become the archetypal first couple of post-Golden humanity, like a darker twist on Adam and Eve. But where Eve's story ends with exile from paradise, Pandora and Epimetheus remain among mortals, wrestling with the suffering they've unleashed, but also with the hope they've accidentally preserved. Here's the quirky little fact. Some ancient versions of the story suggest Epimetheus actually opened the jar himself, not Pandora. Later retellings pin the blame squarely on her, likely because Greek culture enjoyed blaming women for things going wrong. But the earlier myths are more ambiguous, as if to say, maybe the real problem isn't beauty or curiosity, it's stupidity. Imagine an alternate world where the phrase isn't Pandora's box, but Epimetheus's jar. History might have been kinder to her, but much harder on him. Scholars wrestle with what Epimetheus represents. Was he simply a narrative foil to his brother Prometheus, showing foresight versus hindsight, cleverness versus foolishness? Or was he something deeper, a mythic acknowledgement that humans always act too late, always regret after the fact? Some even argue that Epimetheus is the most human figure of all, short-sighted, impulsive, forever tripping into consequences he didn't see coming. He may not be noble, but he's painfully relatable. Picture him now, sitting in the firelight of humanity's first campfires. Prometheus suffers in chains above, Pandora sighs beside him, and Epimetheus just stares into the flames, realizing too late what's been lost. He's not cursed with endless torment, not trapped under the sky like Atlas. His punishment is simply to live with the knowledge of what he's done. Sometimes regret is a quieter, heavier prison than chains. And yet the story doesn't paint him as purely foolish. Without Epimetheus, Pandora's jar never opens and hope never stays behind. Perhaps his thoughtless choice is what makes human existence bearable in the end. Pain floods the world, yes, but so does endurance fueled by that lingering glow of hope. Epimetheus is both the mistake and the reason humanity keeps walking forward. Slow the pace now and imagine him older, shoulders bent, sitting, with Pandora as mortals labour and suffer around them. He watches his brother chained in the distance, hears the eagles cry on the wind, and sighs. He can't undo his choices, can't spit Zeus's trap back into the sky. All he can do is live with it, one day after another, carrying hindsight like a stone in his pocket. And maybe that's the most human thing in this whole saga. Not rebellion, not punishment, but simply learning to live with regret. Epimetheus shows us the ordinary side of myth, the clumsy choices, the oops that ripple forever, the quiet acceptance that comes when you realize you can't take something back. The war is long over, the Titans defeated, but not every one of them ends up in Tartarus, or crushed under punishment like Atlas. Some slip away with softer fates, scattered across the edges of myth, fading into the background like whispers. These are the Titan survivors, the ones who avoid the worst of Zeus's wrath and manage to carve out strange little corners of existence. Their stories aren't loud or dramatic, but they hum quietly, reminders that not every rebel is bound in chains. Take Oceanus, for instance. During the Titanomachy, he never fought against Zeus. He stayed out of it, flowing around the world as he always had, content to be water rather than weapon. Because of this, he isn't punished. He continues to encircle the earth, a quiet survivor, proof that neutrality sometimes pays off. His endless stream keeps humming long after the war, and mortals keep imagining his current wrapping gently around their world. Tethys, too, slips through without scars. She doesn't raise arms against the Olympians, and so she continues nurturing her thousands of river children. Streams, brooks, and springs keep gurgling as they always have, unbothered by the cosmic coup. It's as if the Olympians decided that water, too essential to destroy, should be left alone. If Zeus had declared war on rivers, who would have quenched his thirst afterward? Mnemosyne, the memory titaness, also survives. Her role as mother of the Muses becomes even more vital under Olympian rule. Poets, singers, storytellers, they all call upon her daughters for inspiration, and in doing so they keep Mnemosyne alive in every verse. In a way, she outlives the Titans more gracefully than any of her siblings, because memory never really dies. Themis, goddess of justice and divine order, doesn't just survive, she thrives. She becomes one of Zeus's closest advisors, standing at his side to guide him in his rulings. The Horae, her daughters, mark the seasons, while the Fates weave human lives under her watch. She moves from Titaness of the old order to counselor of the new, her power untouched, her wisdom indispensable. Phoebe finds herself remembered too, not as a warrior but as a grandmother. Through her daughter Leto, she becomes ancestress to Apollo and Artemis, two Olympians who embody prophecy and the hunt. Phoebe herself fades into the background, but her lineage ensures her influence remains woven into the fabric of myth. And then there's Rhea. She endures in a different way, not as a titaness of rebellion, but as the mother of Olympians. Though her heart was broken by Cronus swallowing their children, she becomes honoured as the one who saved Zeus, the quiet matriarch whose cunning preserved the new order. Some later cults even worship her as a mother goddess, blending her image with Cybele, the great mother of Anatolia. Her survival is emotional rather than physical, a kind of soft victory in the middle of loss. Here's the quirky little fact. In some local myths, even Cronus himself wasn't forever trapped. Certain regions, like Crete, worshipped him as a benign agricultural god, softened into a peaceful figure after his violent reign. In these cults he isn't chained in Tartarus, but resting in the Isles of the Blessed, dozing through eternity while crops sway gently in the fields. It's a startling rewrite, the devourer of children transformed into a kindly old spirit of harvest. Myths, apparently, are as changeable as the people who tell them. Scholars debate whether these softer fates were invented later, as cults adapted the Titans into local traditions. Were they always meant to survive in these quieter roles, or did people simply refuse to let go of such old, powerful names? Some argue the Olympians couldn't erase the Titans completely, because the Titans represented forces too primal to kill: memory, justice, rivers, the earth itself. The war ended, but the essentials had to remain. As you rest in this softer aftermath, you can almost feel the pace slow again. Not every Titan is screaming in chains or straining under the sky. Some flow gently like water, some whisper like memory, some stand quietly beside thrones. They are survivors, not because they won, but because they adapted, folded into the new order instead of resisting it. Picture the world at dusk. Rivers glittering, muses singing softly, seasons shifting, the mother of gods watching her children thrive. The Titans haven't vanished, they've just changed, faded, softened into the background of myth. And in that fading there's a kind of peace. The Titans may have faded into the shadows, but their echoes ripple forward in curious ways. Their blood, spilled during the war and during Uranus's fall, seeps into the soil and the sea, and from it comes prophecy, the strange gift of foresight that hums through the veins of Greek myth. The world itself remembers the struggle, and that memory turns into oracles, dreams, and cryptic whispers that guide mortals and gods alike. Take Phoebe, for instance. She passes the gift of prophecy to her grandson Apollo, who claims the shrine at Delphi. But the roots of that oracle don't come from him alone. They reach back into Titan blood. into Phoebe's quiet glow, into the shadows of the old order. When a mortal treks to Delphi and breathes in the smoke, asking for their fate, they're unknowingly tapping into Titan memory. It isn't just Apollo speaking, it's the voice of something older, heavier, still humming under the earth. Themis too is tied to oracles. Some say she was the very first voice of Delphi, a Titaness who once spoke directly to mortals seeking guidance. Her sense of cosmic order, of what ought to be, lingers even after the Olympians take over. Justice and prophecy blur together here. If you know the natural order of things, you can predict what will come next. To the Greeks, this wasn't magic. It was logic written in the stars. Even Mnemosyne slips into this world of foresight. Memory and prophecy are siblings, really. Remembering what has come before helps you imagine what will come after. In some mystery cults, initiates were told to drink not from Lethe, the river of forgetting, but from Mnemosyne's spring, so that they could carry knowledge with them into the afterlife. To remember is to see ahead, because the patterns of the past always echo in the future. Here's the quirky fact. Some oracles didn't just predict events, they did it in riddles, so confusing you could only make sense of them afterward. A king might ask if he should go to war, and the oracle would reply, "If you cross the river, a great empire will fall." The king would hear victory in those words, only to discover later that the empire falling was his own. Prophecy in Greek myth is less about clarity and more about inevitability. It happens, just not how you expect. Scholars debate where all this fascination with prophecy came from. Was it an echo of older shamanic traditions where smoke, dreams, and trance were gateways to divine truth? Was it political, a way to give priests and priestesses authority by claiming their words came from the gods? Or was it simply human, an ancient acknowledgement that we are always guessing at the future, always fumbling for patterns in the chaos? Titans and Olympians alike become stand-ins for that craving to know what's next. Picture the setting of an oracle. The ground hums faintly under your feet, still warm with the blood of ancient gods. A priestess sways in the fumes of burning laurel, her eyes half closed, her voice shifting into riddles. The air feels heavy, like a storm is always about to break, and you realize the prophecy isn't really about the words. It's about the weight of inevitability, the sense that the future is already written, even if you don't understand it yet. The Titans themselves are gone from the stage, but their influence lingers here, in every prophecy, in every dream that feels too heavy to ignore. Cronus may be chained, Atlas may strain, but their blood still speaks, whispering truths that mortals chase in smoky caves and quiet temples. Even in defeat, the Titans leave fingerprints on the future. Slow down now, and imagine lying at the mouth of a cave like Delphi, cool stone beneath your back, the stars wheeling overhead. You can almost hear faint voices drifting out, speaking of what will come. Not all is clear, not all is comforting, but it's enough to remind you that stories move forward, that the past always leans into the future. In that hum of prophecy, the Titans live on. The Titans are nearly gone now, their names echoing only faintly, their bodies chained in Tartarus or softened into background forces. The Olympians rise, young and brilliant, claiming the thrones of sky, sea, and underworld. But before the lullaby of this myth ends, the story pauses to trace how the old order passed fully into the new, how bedtime tales crowned a new pantheon and left the Titans to fade like dreams at dawn. Zeus, having won the war, divides the cosmos with his brothers. Poseidon claims the sea, trident flashing as waves bow to his command. Hades takes the underworld, slipping into the shadowy realm beneath the earth with his helm of invisibility. Zeus himself takes the sky, thunderbolt in hand, clouds swirling under his reign. It's neat, orderly, decisive, far cleaner than the years of battle that led to it. The Olympians step into their domains as though they were always meant to, their power shining brighter than the heavy, ancient force of the Titans. The world reshapes itself under their rule. Where the Titans embodied primal forces, rivers, memory, justice, light, the Olympians become personalities, vivid and flawed, their dramas spilling into every corner of human life. Zeus cheats, Hera fumes, Poseidon rages, Hades schemes. They aren't distant like the Titans, they're messy, human-like, endlessly entertaining. The Greeks saw themselves in the Olympians, for better or worse, and that made the new gods impossible to forget. Yet the Titans never vanish entirely. Their shadows linger in rituals, in oracles, in the cracks of myth. Rhea survives as the mother who ensured Zeus's rise. Themis advises even in Olympus. Mnemosyne inspires every poet who calls to the muses. Oceanus still flows, circling the earth, steady as ever. They become the background hum, the infrastructure of the cosmos, while the Olympians strut on stage. Here's your quirky fact to close the loop. In some far-off versions, there's a prophecy that even Zeus will one day be overthrown, just as Uranus fell to Cronus and Cronus fell to Zeus. Some whispered that a son born to Tethys, a sea goddess, would surpass his father. To prevent this, Zeus married her off to a mortal, producing Achilles instead. A hero, yes, but not a god. The cycle of children toppling parents always hovers like static in the background, reminding even Zeus that no throne is forever. Scholars debate what this cycle really meant to the Greeks. Was it just a convenient way to explain political change, old kings falling, new kings rising? Or was it a philosophical truth, a recognition that time itself devours every ruler, every age, no matter how golden? Cronus devoured his children, Uranus was cut down by his son, and Zeus himself is warned. The cycle doesn't stop, it just pauses, waiting for the next hand to slip from the throne. And so the Titans' story closes, not with a bang, but with a slow fade. They were the scaffolding of the cosmos, the raw material from which the Olympians carved their reign. Their names are less remembered, their temples fewer, but without them there would be no Zeus, no fire, no seasons, no myths at all. They are the dream before the morning, the heavy weight of sleep before waking into the sharper, messier stories of gods and heroes. Pause here one last time. Imagine the cosmos settling after centuries of upheaval. Rivers murmuring, seasons turning, stars wheeling quietly above. The Titans hum beneath it all, heavy and eternal, while the Olympians laugh, fight and love in their shining new halls. The old gods sleep, the new gods strut, and humanity lies in between, telling stories by firelight to remember both. It's a strange kind of ending, but also a beginning, the Titans handing the stage to the Olympians, who will carry Greek myth forward. The lull of their story lingers, heavy but calm, a reminder that every age fades into another. Every ruler is just one chapter in a longer book. And for now, the chapter of the Titans closes, their legacy resting quietly in the soil, the rivers, the memory of myth itself. And now that the Titans have had their say, the story slows, softer, like waves pulling back into the sea. You've wandered through the yawning void of chaos, watched the earth and sky embrace too tightly, seen children swallowed whole and then spit back into the light. You've heard the clash of thunder and stone, the roar of hundred-handers, the groan of Atlas's burden. It's been a saga of weight and wonder, but now the noise drifts into silence. The Titans fade into the background, but that doesn't mean they disappear. They remain in the quiet structures of the world, in the way rivers still flow, in the way memory lingers, in the way seasons turn with patient rhythm. They're not gods you pray to anymore, but they're still there, like the bones beneath a building, unseen but holding everything steady. The Olympians may steal the spotlight, flashing bright with their squabbles and affairs, but the Titans are the deep notes humming underneath. They remind you that even chaos has a foundation, that even rebellion becomes the ground others walk on. And maybe that's why their story feels so fitting for sleep. It's not about neat endings or loud victories. It's about the slow drift of ages, the way one thing always gives way to another, heavy but natural. So let your mind rest now. Picture Atlas still standing at the edge of the world, the stars pressing down but never falling. Picture Oceanus still flowing, steady and endless. Picture Mnemosyne's bowl of memory rippling softly, storing all the stories you've just drifted through. The Titans hum on, quiet and patient.